And if it's Tuesday in hurricane season, that means it's time to track the tropics from so sunny and so beautiful, not Central Florida. I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And in Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
All right, so clouds, lots of moisture in both of our areas. You can definitely tell we are not in summer anymore, Jeremy, as a bunch of tropical moisture kind of working into both of our areas right now.
Yeah, we really need rain in our area. We've had clouds, but very little rain, and we're going on a 6+ inch rainfall deficit since September the 1st. So we could use some rain.
Yeah. So for right now, Jeremy, this is where we are in terms of the tropics. You want to chat a little bit?
Yeah, you're looking at IR satellite right there. So that's taking sort of the temperature of the clouds. The reds that you see there, the darker colors, higher cloud tops. So likely some rain or maybe thunderstorms down in the Western Caribbean. This is something we've been talking about, I feel like, forever. Area of interest down there. And it finally has an X, so some sort of broad low pressure area down there at the moment. 70% chance of tropical development. And as we were discussing before we started here, the models aren't super excited about this now, but we may see something form briefly.
Yeah, I mean, the water temperatures there are sufficient, but the models were a lot more excited a couple of days ago. And then, interestingly enough, kind of shifting focus from this to more of a Gulf of Mexico kind of thing, Jeremy. And I think that it's the complexity of this Gulf of Mexico feature that's tying into perhaps the downfall of that Caribbean feature, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, a lot of energy in the Gulf right now, and I know people are going to ask us, hey, that thing in the Gulf, is that tropical in nature? Well, it's not highlighted right now, and it's probably just going to stay a low pressure area, and it has some fronts attached to it right now, so that's kind of the one thing in the National Hurricane Center. If you get fronts attached to something, not necessarily tropical in nature.
Yeah, but it's going to be a complex scenario. So here's the setup right now. You're ending up with these old fronts and this area of low pressure developing. And this afternoon, it's just pumping moisture, cloud cover into the entire southeastern United States. But this is an interesting feature because look what happens. Over the next couple of days, there's this secondary area of low pressure that forms around South Florida. And then as it kind of crosses near or over Florida and moves out toward the Bahamas, it's deepening and developing. And even if it's not tropical in nature, Jeremy, it's definitely something that we should be watching just using our long range methodology.
Yeah, I would say 100% this low that's in the Gulf right now that was in the Western Gulf, kind of north central Gulf, eastern areas. And then if we get another low to form east of Florida off the southeast coastline and goes up the coast. Those are things that we are very, very interested in for next hurricane season using the long range methodology. We've had a tremendous amount of success with. So what we're really focused on, those lows, the position of them, and that kind of leads to what may end up being some hot spots in our forecast next year.
Yeah, so let's do this, Jeremy. Let's look at kind of the areas that we have watched with low pressure this year. There's a couple of new ones that we've added since we last chatted on Tracking the Tropics last Tuesday. So we added, there was a little area of low pressure off of the Florida southeastern United States coast. But this one here, that November 13th, November 14th, these are additional kind of interesting points, and that 14th will come over here and eventually work closer and closer to Florida, but stay out over the Gulf, and then we'll have to kind of watch around South Florida and out east of Florida, out east of the United States, as this progresses over the next few days' time.
I think it's interesting because really when the pattern set up around October 11th, 12th, we also had a low in the Western Gulf tracked off to the northeast. That one went into the Florida Panhandle or North Florida. There you go. See, Eric's tracking it with the yellow pointer there. And this one, sort of a similar track, but then it kind of just ends up going east, and another low forms off or east of Florida. These are definitely key features that we sort of have to decipher their importance and then look at them again 1 or 2 cycles down the road.
Right. And we, I've had a few people asking me, Jeremy, like, have we gotten our first recycle for the year? Have we done that? And I don't think we're there yet. What do you think?
I don't think so either, because I was like, oh, hey, this one right now. But if you look, what's today, the 14th?
Yep.
And then we'd be at like a 34, 35-day cycle if this was the version of October. That's too quick. If you look a week or two down the road, there's more lows that potentially could be in that position of the Gulf. So we're probably looking at something 42 plus days.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll certainly look at those computer models and point that out. It seems 42, 45, somewhere in that window, if this next iteration, if this next thing plays out. But certainly we'll look at that. One thing, though, that you had pointed out, we're watching a Caribbean feature. We're watching this moisture in the Gulf of Mexico. And Jeremy, one thing that you had pointed out was this idea of water temperatures. Are they in the vicinity of tropical development? And the magic number, of course, for that, Jeremy, is?
Around 80 degrees.
Yeah. So here, take a look.
Certainly in the Caribbean, you see those water temps there. That could support tropical development. If something develops, probably more of a rainmaker than some big, huge wind event for any island down there as it moves northeast. But wouldn't surprise us if we at the very least get a tropical depression.
Yeah, and models are kind of showing lowering pressures all over. And because they're, and we'll look at it here in a second, but because they're not like going all in on this is it, nothing else around it. It's sloppy, I guess, is the best way to put it, right, Jeremy? And because it's sloppy, thankfully, that means that we're not looking at any kind of massive developing systems.
Right, and I think even eventually down the road, it might get absorbed or picked up into the front that will be tied to that thing east of Florida. So, as you mentioned, this is pretty complex. We're going to have 1 or 2 lows, Gulf, east of Florida, that thing down in the Caribbean. And this is the time of year, I think for us, it gets kind of exciting because we're given all these clues. And then in the winter, we kind of have to put those together. And eventually our solution or our final product is the hurricane season forecast on March the 1st.
I love the idea, though, that, Jeremy, we're kind of, we're opening the doors and trying to be very transparent. Not that we're not transparent, but like developing it with our friends that are joining us on the Tracking the Tropics broadcasts here. So it shouldn't be, any surprise kind of what we're starting to think. But anyway, why don't we start looking at some of the computer models and just kind of dial in a little bit there? What do you think?
Yeah, let's take a look at them.
All right, so very quickly off the top, this is kind of the initialization, if you will, of the American GFS model, all right? And so what we have is on the bottom of the screen there in blue, lower-ish pressure in the Caribbean, and look just south of Louisiana there, just a little blue dot, a weak but area of lower than average pressure. Watch through time as that area of low pressure starts to deepen. That green dot there, closed low, deepening out over Mississippi, Alabama, and just kind of hangs there, okay? This is 00Z Thursday, which is actually in Eastern time, 7 p.m. Wednesday, okay? There's that area of low pressure, basically right at the mouth of Mobile Bay there. Then you develop real quickly, look around South Florida, bada bing, bada boom, right there. You develop this area of low pressure out east of Florida, according to the American model, and at the same time, you're developing this thing in the Caribbean, and that, Jeremy, is the whole thing, I think, where the models are just trying to figure this out because there's a lot happening all kind of simultaneously. It's a very complex setup.
I'm also very curious, once we get that thing to develop near east of Florida, is it going to kind of go due northeast and turn into some big coastal storm for parts of the maybe Carolinas, mid-Atlantic, northeast area?
Mm-hmm.
Because if that's the case, again, our mindset is always kind of next tropical season, but for this winter, recycle 1 or 2 cycles down the road, could that be some sort of huge nor'easter?
Yeah, I mean, and the reality is it very much could. You and I are far enough south that that's not a thing, although coastal storm systems batter our communities. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see the trajectory of this, and then looking at the kind of the long-term forecast products, our other long-range methodology. I definitely saw this morning on the BSR, Jeremy, an indicator of quite a nasty nor'easter type setup down the pike as well.
Yeah, so We'll see what this plays out to be, but could this be one of the more signature parts of the pattern? I would say it's possible. For us, we're just really looking at any lows that hang out near coastal areas this time of year. And I would say, as you mentioned, we're trying to figure out cycle duration right now. As we get into December, that's probably cycle number 2, and we start to get more clues, and we just want to see if some of these lows then show up again in cycle 2, and then that just sort of builds our confidence.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, all right, enough of that. We can get back to the computer model data here. So take a look. There's the GFS kind of showing a low near Louisiana, low near Florida, and another low out there in the Caribbean. Watch how there's that northerly projection on the American model, doing exactly, Jeremy, what you had mentioned, going up off the coast of the Outer Banks and potentially becoming a nor'easter. Meanwhile, you still have that area of low pressure over Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, and then you've got the Caribbean thing kind of doing its own thing as well. So this really is a very interesting, multifaceted part of the weather pattern.
Yeah, and if you are able to call up the European model,
Yep.
the European model doesn't seem quite as organized once this thing gets off from east of Florida.
Yeah, it's definitely shallow or weaker, but it almost, the European, it almost takes that Caribbean feature and absorbs it.
Right. It kind of has that front pick everything up,
Yep.
and then it's all kind of one mess once it's over the open Atlantic.
Yeah. Either way, I mean, that's a storm system signature, and whether or not it's tropical or not, that's definitely being taken into consideration when we look at our long-range forecasting going ahead. I think that's
Right.
no doubt.
Yeah, I'm looking at the what you just showed, the GFS.
Yep.
I'm just kind of peeking at the 500 millibar, and it does have a upper low that goes from east of Florida, kind of towards the Carolinas or off the Carolinas there. So we'll see what reality plays out here in 3-4 days. The models can say one thing, but we always look what the actual maps are showing once it's happened, because you can't argue with reality.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so let's look at the ensembles now. So what you were just looking at was the operational GFS, the operational European, but this is now the American GFS ensemble plots, okay? Think of it like this. You take the GFS, you take the European, and you run them 50 different ways, or in the European case, 100 different ways. And what you end up with is subtle differences, and it really peels back the curtain. So right off the bat, you've got ensemble members really developing an area of low pressure in 2 places here. This is 1 a.m. Friday morning. You've got a bunch of ensemble members firing up an area of low pressure off of the east coast of Florida, and then a bunch of ensemble members firing up an area of low pressure over the Caribbean, and taking them all and just kind of broadening them out. It's kind of a sloppy mess of sorts. This is another way to look at it. All really not doing much in terms of development, but areas of low pressure to track nonetheless. Okay, so that's the American model. Interestingly enough, look at this, Jeremy. So there are a few ensemble members that once that Caribbean moisture moves out on most members, some of them have it stalled out and just sitting there and actually developing it into a storm and moving it out. Like, isn't that kind of interesting how that plays out?
I think that's kind of fascinating, but as we've been talking about here the last couple of weeks, I feel like some models have been developing something down there for like the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. So it's, again, take an ensemble member with a grain of salt. They're running in parallel, and there's a reason that, we have 50 of them to look at. So that's that. Then if we look at the European ensemble, let me just back it up to the beginning. Same kind of idea. There's that area of low pressure in the northern Gulf. Watch how it loses the kind of interest of the model, and they all go east of Florida and into the Caribbean. And then the European really wants to kind of blend them all together and move them out, right? So not as strong, at least, temporarily. If we go to like regions and we go to the Northeast just for fun, hey, Gewalt, give me a second here. But look at that, Jeremy. There's the ensemble showing a bunch of areas of low pressure, or a bunch of indicators of low pressure off the Northeast United States. There's your nor'easter, at least a signature of it.
Right. And I think the key will be how far obviously off from the coast or if it gets right along it,
Yeah.
because if you have this massive system that's just out over the water, it might be kind of windy at the coast
Right.
or something, but maybe not a lot of precipitation. We'll see what happens. Again, you mentioned complex setup, so models not probably not a lot of confidence in the path here once we get 4 or 5 days down the road.
Yeah, yeah. So again, that's why we look at models, but we remember that computer models are guidance, not gospel. So we look, we monitor, and we kind of just get ready for the next run. So that's where we're at right now. Thankfully, no major concerns for major hurricanes or landfalls or anything like that, but it is a good reminder hurricane season is still very much playing out across the Atlantic basin, even if it is wrapping up in the next couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, we just have over 2 weeks left. And again, I think we've talked about this the last one of these that we will do. We're going to recap the season. So maybe we'll end up with, who knows, maybe like 21 storms for the season. We're at 20 right now. We'll show you how we compare to other forecasts that came out preseason. And then obviously we'll try to keep everyone updated maybe a couple times between December 1st and March 1st.
Yeah, works for me, my friend. All right, let's do this. Let's look at the numbers and just kind of see where we are for today. You had mentioned it just a second ago, but let's look at the numbers compared to where we were this time last year and, of course, where we normally find ourselves this time of year.
Yeah, 14 named storms is average. Last year we hit that right on the nose. This year we're at 20. That does include the January unnamed storm. And maybe we add one more on. I thought we'd see 1 to 2 named storms this month. We've had 0 so far. I'm hoping there's not any more named storms. So I would like to be off by 1 or 2 storms this month.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, sir. I would agree with that. All right, named storm days. We've tracked systems for 99 days this year. The 30-year average, 66. Last year was 55. So, it's been an active year, no doubt. Though, what's interesting is the fact that, last year there were so many landfalls and so many big landfalls. This year, not the case. So that really is a testament to it doesn't matter how many storms there are. If one hits you, it's a bad year. This year has been, at least tracking storm-wise, we've been dealing with storms twice as many days as last year. And the ACE score so supersedes last year. I mean, last year through today, we were at 94.7. This year through today, 145.6. So again, just like Max Mayfield would say, Jeremy, it takes one storm to hit your area to make it a bad season.
Yep, that's all it takes. And this year, our landfalls were in South Texas. That was probably more of a rainy system. Obviously, we had a major hurricane there. Big Bend area of Florida, or kind of that northeastern Gulf area. And then we also had Ophelia into the Carolinas.
Yeah, good times. I'm ready for the season to be over with.
Yes.
Christine says, thank you. I can't ask for a better breakdown. You both do a great job. Thank you, Christine. Any questions, y'all? Anything from the peanut gallery here? No more hurricanes,
right
Debbie
now,
says. What'd you say?
Is some good mornings, hellos out there. Let me switch here. We have Eric and I have some multiple accounts we dropped this on, so we'll just see if there's any other questions. I think people are just maybe just exhausted by the season, want to look ahead to maybe holidays, something positive like that. And I know in my area, all people are talking about when it comes to the weather right now is we need rain.
Yeah, I mean, we do too.
Really bad.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting, Jeremy, is the fact that being in an El Nino pattern, right? Like, both of our areas really do ramp up the threat for severe weather come winter and spring. So I do think that we will have some rain. Will we catch up in our areas for deficits? I don't know, but we'll definitely have opportunities for jet stream-driven storm systems.
Yeah, but it's also interesting that, okay, some people just blanket El Nino. They throw the southeast in this big rain area. Well, I mean, we literally over the last, I think it's 31 days now, we've had 5/100ths of an inch of rain.
Yeah.
We've really only had 2 rains since the start of October.
We had an interesting stat. Saturday, we got 1/10 of an inch of rain. Okay. That was the first rain that we had seen in 28 days, which, when I went back to look, that's the third longest dry stretch in Orlando in 20 years. Isn't that something?
Wow.
So
So
yeah,
it's
we're
definitely
in the
unusual.
exact same boat.
Mm-hmm. And I know parts of Louisiana, Gulf Coast are in like exceptional droughts right now.
Yeah.
This will help a little bit. I think that low down there, but it's not really, it's kind of paralleling the coast. So it's
Right.
not like pulling right up there, bringing all this moisture in. So we'll see kind of the tracks of these lows as we go through winter, and maybe we'll get a little change into spring.
It'll be interesting too, because really interesting to watch that.
Yeah, and we still have maybe a couple of weeks left of new things in the pattern we haven't
Yeah.
seen yet that we'll be tracking. So we'll continue to be dropping those lows on our map. By next week at this time, we'll probably have a few more, maybe east of Florida, off the east coast of the U.S., and it will be, I think, fascinating to see how this kind of complex solution this week into this coming weekend plays out.
100%. Laura says, y'all killed it this season. I know it's not over, but we're thankful for you. Well, and I'm also grateful, Jeremy, that we're doing this. This is a new thing we started this hurricane season, and it's been kind of an interesting vessel to get more information out to folks.
Yeah, and I know you get this late in the season, and as I mentioned, people maybe not as interested in the tropics, but we still have a good amount of people on here today.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is get people prepped almost for next season. We're paying attention to what's going on currently in the weather. But as you guys like to say, we're sort of pulling the curtain back into how we make our long range forecast. And that map that you show those storm systems, that's probably one of the biggest things we use. And then we look at the specific dates. I think the next step is we get through these next 2 weeks, and then what happens in the recycle of the pattern.
Yeah, yeah. And that leads to Destiny's question. Destiny says, if there is a Gulf low developing, can that develop things next year? And so, yes, it's not a stupid question at all. That's the idea. That's why we've got, this graphic that we're looking at and putting together. We're keeping track of where all the storm systems are in October and November. That way, looking ahead to developing our hurricane forecast for next year, we can look at the trajectories, the angles of attack, where they're pulsing up, pulsing down, and start working on our hurricane season forecast. And I can tell you that Jeremy and I, kind of behind the scenes, have already started at least having discussions of where we would be interested in starting to highlight stuff. So, none of that will come as a surprise to anybody, but we're already starting that.
Right. And I'd say in the next few weeks, we could even probably put down kind of our initial hot spots between you and I, and then begin tweaking those as we go along.
Yeah, that could be interesting. Jeremy's hotspots, my hotspots, and then we can work on blending them as we watch things recycle.
Yeah, I think we've always, when we've teamed up on this forecast, we've never really had any big disagreements or anything. And I think once the pattern, you see it, reveals itself, it becomes kind of obvious.
Yeah. The only thing is I wanted Texas to be a hotspot and you didn't, so we did the area of interest this year, and I'm just going to sit back and say, beginner's luck? I'm just kidding.
I think, we've kind of always had those little yellow areas highlighted. And outside of that, sort of that one thing down there, not much really happened.
No, and I would also venture to say that is a part of luck. Like, there's luck that plays into this too. And just as quickly as I could have been lucky if that would have been the case, could have been not lucky and it wasn't the case, and then you'd have been the one making fun of me, and there was literally a 50-50 shot of that playing out. So
yeah. So overall, though, 3 landfalls, and all 3 were in spots we highlighted.
Yeah, so I'm fine with that. Any other questions, y'all? Otherwise, for me, as we transition into that forecasting mode, in all honesty, I'm very excited, Jeremy, to not only work on this again with you, and I'm grateful for your guidance on it, but to share it with everybody else, because I think that it will make us better at working on the forecast when there's the peanut gallery throwing in their 2 cents and asking the questions. So I love that.
Yes. So yeah, that's about all I have going on this end this week.
Very good. All right. Well, then that's fine. Look, it's 10:25. Some of us have to go do a new newscast. Others, can sit in their chief meteorologist high castle and be fed, bonbons and be fanned down by the crews.
Or head outside and mulch up leaves.
There it is. All right. So, listen, thank you for hanging out, Jeremy, and thank you all for joining us this morning. From cloudy and dreary Central Florida, I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And from Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22, Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
All right, buddy. Thank you very much. Take care.
See ya.